All right, in this warm-up, we have to understand something called the empirical rule. When you have normally distributed data, meaning it forms a bell curve, each one of these marks that I've put on this picture represent one standard deviation going to the right and to the left. Right in the middle, this is the mean. This is the mean right in the middle, okay? So, as it turns out, it's going to be the same percentage of the data in each one of these zones every time, and you need to memorize the following percentages. So write this down. In this first zone, you've got 34% of the data. In the next zone, you've got 13.5% of the data. In the next zone, you've got 2.35% of the data. In the final zone, you have 0.15% of the data. So it's really just those four numbers, right? Because as I go in the other direction, obviously mirror image, right? So in this block right here, what am I about to put?
You're about to put 34.
Yeah, 34% of the data is in this zone. 13.5% of the data is in this zone. 2.35% of the data is in this zone. And 0.15% of the data is in this zone. If you added up all of these blocks, what do you think you would get? 100%. They should all add up to 100%. Okay? So I want you to take 2 minutes and memorize these numbers right now. I'm going to pause the video so you can do that. All right, one more thing before I release you to memorize this information. I mean, you could add these up over and over again, but no, that's not the we're going to memorize it. If you look at the middle two zones, all right, in other words, if you look at the two zones that are within one standard deviation to the left or to the right, what percent of the data is between negative 1 standard deviation and positive 1 standard deviation?
68%.
Clearly that's 68 because it's just the 34 and the 34, that's 68. So memorize that, 68%. Okay, if you go 2 standard deviations in both directions, all right, I'll save you from doing the addition. That comes out to be 95% of the data. Okay, so 2 standard deviations in both directions, you're looking at 95% of the data. Now, if you go 3 standard deviations, all right, all the way from here to here, what you're looking at is 99.7% of the data. 99.7. Don't get it twisted. Sounds like a radio station. 99.7 FM. All right, now what are we going to do with it? All right, so turn over your paper to that other sheet. Okay, in the first part here it says draw the distribution. We're talking about an aptitude. An aptitude test has a mean of 220 and a standard deviation of 10, and it's approximately normal. We're supposed to draw it. Try to do this without looking at the sheet that we just memorized, all right? So do it just like I'm about to do right now. So you can just draw yourself a line and then just put a bell on top of it like this. You know, just draw yourself sort of a hill. Obviously it doesn't have to be pretty because look at mine, okay? And then so here's how we're going to mark it off. You can put one line right down the middle, all right? That's going to be the mean. And then go near the edges, near the ends on the left and right, and put 2 more lines on the left and right like that. Okay, I'm going to change colors to make it obvious what I'm doing, because I'm going to put 2 more lines between these lines. So I'm going to put 2 lines in here like this. Okay, see those 2 lines I did? I'm going to put 2 lines in here as well. Okay, you'll find that that'll be all those zones that we just talked about. In fact, let's fill in those numbers real quick. Try to do it from memory. Okay, so remember, we know that this is 34%. What's the next one?
13.5.
13.5, you doing it from memory? What's the next one?
2.35%.
2.35%. What's the last one? 0.15%. And obviously it's the same thing going both ways. Okay, 13.5. Okay, 2.35, 0.15. Now, the numbers. Let's put these numbers on the bottom. The mean goes right in the middle. So we have a mean of 220. The standard deviation. Each one of these marks is one standard deviation to the left and to the right. So if the standard deviation is 10, that means I'm going to go up by 10. So this is going to be 230, 240, and 250. All right, and this is going to be 210, 200, and 190. So when they ask me, where do the middle 95% of the values lie? Now, based on what we memorized on the other screen, how many standard deviations am I going to go left and right to get 95% of the data? 2 standard deviations to the left and to the right. So that means I'm going to go from here to here. That's 2 standard deviations out. Okay, so where are the middle 95% of the data? 200 to 240. And you can just write it as an interval this way, 200, comma, 240. All right, that means from 200 to 240. Okay, like a domain or something. All right, where do the lowest 16% of the values lie? Okay, now if you started adding up these numbers, look, if you added up these first 2 zones, I hope you have your calculators. Like, if you do 0.15 plus 2.35, what do you get? That turns out to be 2.5 so far. All right, what if I add up the first 3 zones?
16.
There's your 16 that's being discussed, okay? So this is your 16 right here, 3 zones worth. All right, and I purposefully did it on the left because it said the lowest 16% of the values. So look where the cutoff is, 210. So the lowest 16% is below 210. All right, so I could use the word and I can just say below 210. Or I could have said, you know, I could have said like less than. I could have used like a less than sign, less than 210. But let's just say below 210. Let's just keep it simple. Okay. Oh, you know what I could have said if I wanted to do interval notation? I could have said negative infinity to 210. You know, same thing. That's the same thing as below 210. All right, where do the lowest 2.5% of the values lie? Well, we just talked about that a second ago.
Below 200.
Correct. All right, if you add up the 0.15 and the 2.35, there's your 2.5% right there. All right, it's 2 zones worth, the bottom 2 zones. So that's below 200. So we can just say below 200. Okay, or we could say negative infinity to 200. Okay. All right. Now, find the percentage of data that is greater than 210. That's how you would read this. All right. You could call it probability if you're talking about randomly picking someone, or you can just say percentage. It's the same thing. So this is saying what's the percentage of the data that is greater than the number 210. So let's take a look at that. Okay, what's that noise? Okay, so greater than 210. So we're talking about from here on. Okay, but look at this, guys. If I went from right here over like this, see what I did? What percent of the data did I just color in just then? Right, like starting from the 220 over, that's 50% of the data right there, because it's from the middle. So I could take that 50% and then just add on an extra, how much did I just color in now?
34.
See that 34? Okay. So just to help you do your calculations faster, use the 50% and then go from there. So it's 50% plus 34%. That saves you from having to add each of the numbers individually. So what is 50% plus that extra 34%? That's 84%. You probably don't even need a calculator for that, do you? Okay, so 84% of the data we just discussed. Okay, find the percentage of the data that is less than 240. Okay, so let me just erase all this extra. All right, so less than 240. So here's 240, here's less than 240. All right, so I have a choice. I can either start with my 50 and add 34 and add 13.5, or I could start from 100 and subtract. Okay? When you get comfortable with this, you're going to begin to memorize like Erica has already done. Erica, the blue part that I just colored in, can you tell me what percentage that is?
2.5.
See, Erica's already memorized that the two pieces on the very ends add up to 2.5%. You don't have to memorize it because you could always add them up real quick, but you're going to accidentally memorize it anyway. So you could go 100%, take away 2.5%, and that will give you everything below 240. So what's that? What's 100 minus 2 point? That's 87.5. 97.5. Okay, so that's why this is going to be 97.5%. Okay? All right, one more. When you see an interval like this, 200 is less than x, which is less than 230, you should be thinking one word, between. This means what percentage of the data is between 200 and 230. Okay? So let's look at that. Between 200 and 230. So let me erase all this. So here's 200. And here's 230. Okay? Of course, right there in the middle, that's our 68%. So you could go 68 plus an extra 13.5. What's that? 81.5? Okay, so that's how you do it. 81.5%. Okay, and that is called the empirical rule, using those memorized numbers. Okay, we'll look at that again later.